So, do you have any like tips though? I mean, obviously teaching at like an awesome university like Purdue is like a really big deal. Any like tips for people that are like in mentoring? Like if you're a more senior designer and you're mentoring someone junior, like what advice do you have for them?
Well, so the biggest thing for me was just to be humble. To be humble and not be greedy. I know that sounds kind of weird, but don't hang on so tightly to your tips and tricks and your special things that you've learned. The thing that I discovered, which I thought was super cool, was that I let go of all these things that I had learned, these little like secrets, shortcuts, color palettes that I thought, were really cool and so forth, and how to get to there. And I learned that when I gave those out to students, when I gave those out to people I were mentoring, I got it back like 1,000-fold. So I found that people would come back to me and be like, oh, hey, you know that cool technique you showed us on how to, do this? I discovered that. And did you know that you could do this, this, and this? So I got like three times back, what I gave. And that's the biggest thing is just, share your experience with folks. Share your closest guarded secrets, and don't be afraid to give those up.
No, I love
because
that.
people will see that, and they'll bring it back to you
No,
tenfold.
that's amazing advice. So we went from consulting to Purdue. What's after Purdue?
Yeah. So did that for a while. Then they were going to push me to get a PhD. At the time, I did not know of anybody in design that had a PhD. So I happened to do some work for the Children's Museum of Indianapolis and just loved the vibe that place gave off. And they had an opening, and so I saw my opportunity. I went up against like 700 other people that were trying to go for this job. It was a management job, but it was like management of interactives in the museum. So I went for it. Since I had done some freelance work for those folks during my tenure as a professor, thankfully I was able to make some connections and get in there. And that is when, for me, UX really took off. Like I was teaching usability at Purdue, but it was the old school stuff. It was basic UI stuff, like hierarchy and colors and the way you do the taxonomy of information and things like that. But being at the museum, I got to see truly how people worked with things. So, I was designing interactives. I was working with the educational branch of the museum to figure out goals and why we would want children and adults and their parents to interact with these things, what we were trying to show them. And then some of them were online, some of them were kiosk based. Some of them were kind of a mixture of hybrid of physical with software. And so I got exposed to this huge arena of not only design and interaction, but the eye-opening response of exposing my own bias of what I thought people would interact with, putting it out on the floor, and then watching it fail miserably.
Did you guys, it's kind of in a way, I love that you have the background of doing both digital and working in physical spaces too, and kind of bridging that gap. I find that incredibly interesting. I do not have any experience kind of doing that. I've been pretty much just web-based my entire career. But I would love to know, when you have a website, right? It's easy to A/B test. Is the button blue or green? Which one do users like better? But when you're taking something A/B testing or doing user research, for lack of a better word, at a children's museum, it's the stakes, how did you do it? Was it based off of a child's reaction? How many kids went up to it? How did you think about whether or not your design was successful in that situation?
Yeah, so for me, that exposed the whole area of discovery and research and getting feedback. So we started figuring out, we've got to go out on the floor, we've got to grab a clipboard, we've got to do observational discovery. So I got into a ton of that, which was just kind of sitting back and watching people interact with it. We tried to put as many triggering mechanisms as we could within the software program so we could kind of see where people would fall off. But the reality was, for me anyways, was watching people in the environment, which brought up a huge discovery for me, which is that, a lot of times we design based on, we think people are going to be staring at the screen and totally mesmerized by whatever experience we have. but we forget that they have tabs open,
Yeah.
that there are people talking next to them, that there's light coming in. They may have a poor internet connection. You know, there's all these things that are beyond our control that are in the physical space. And so a lot of times we don't take in those into consideration. So for me, that was huge to watch families come in, guide each other, make huge mistakes that I didn't think were possible.
Yeah, of course, right.
And then try to figure out, oh God, how do we even fix this thing?
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Design Huddle. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not express the views or opinions of our employer.